Welcome back to the Angry Ewok channel. Today we'll be discussing some of the new rules changes from Armada 1.0 to Armada 1.5 and trying to give some real world examples of how those changes are going to affect your games and what kind of implications that may have for list building. I've played about 11 games of Armada 1.5 up to this point, so not a massive wealth of games, but this is going to be my opinions and hopefully some objective observations, and we'll just go from there. We'll not be seeing a lot of after action reports for the next couple weeks because I'm playing in the Armada Clone Wars tournament that was launched the day Clone Wars released, and I'm going to hold on to those after action reports until the tournament is concluded. One, so that I don't broadcast my list strategy and thinking, but also because my opponents are going to be doing the same thing. I would hate for someone to come on my channel, look at a list, and then prepare and game plan against one of my opponent's lists. That would not be fair to them. We're going to start our discussion today with the new pass token mechanic, and so that we all are working from the same sheet of music, I'm going to put up 4 slides. These are going to be excerpts from the new online rules reference, and I encourage you to stop the video, read these passages in their entirety if you are not crystal clear on exactly what it says, because we want to be working from the actual rules text, because this is a pivotal piece of information that's going to color everything you do in Armada going forward. Some big takeaways are pass tokens discard. Once you use them, they're gone. So be particular about when you use them, and if you're playing against someone with pass tokens, it's good to try to fake them like you're going to try to dive in and then pull back, maybe trying to bait that token out of them. If you're the first player, you cannot lead your turn with a pass token. If you're the second player, you can lead your turn with a pass token, but you cannot use it if you have more unactivated ships than the second player and than the first player. And you can't pass on consecutive turns. Now we're going to go into some examples of this pass token mechanic in action. So the most conventional way the pass token gets used is when the second player has fewer activations than the first player. So here you'll see clones on the bottom, you'll see separatists on the top. The clones are the first player in this scenario, and the separatists have 1 fewer activation. So the separatists will get 1 pass token. And you'll see that the weapons ranges, these are both deployed at the front of their deployment zone directly across from one another. Your weapon range is going to play a big factor in when you use your pass tokens, because until shots are getting fired, it's not really a huge, not usually going to be a big deal, because you're trying to basically diffuse a last first situation, or diffuse a situation where you give away your battle plan before the enemy commits to his. So we're going to skip forward a couple activations. The 2 consulars are going to move, and one of the acclimators is going to move, and also the munificent on the left side of your screen and the hard cell on your right will move. And you'll see that that third move from this acclimator. So basically, first player has activated 3 ships, second player has activated 2 ships, and at the completion of this move, you now see the weapon range of that acclimator, and obviously they'll pull that maneuver template off, and now the second player has to decide what to do. Before pass tokens, he would then have to move because he has to activate a ship. He'd probably do something like this. He might have done a nav command slow up, but he'll move to this. And then what that does, obviously, is that gives the first player perfect information and perfect ranging on this target. That acclimator that has not activated then gets to see where its target is and make a move, closing in, and then trying to set up a good shot. And he is able to move in and get to a blue range shot right here. Not really as big a deal as maybe it would have been if it was a black range shot, but you get the idea. The first player is getting to get all the information they could want on the target's location and direction, and then react. To illustrate the importance of the pass token, we're going to rewind an activation and go back to the place where the clones have activated their 2 consulars and the first acclimator, and the separatists have activated their munificent and their hard cell. If the Separatist player chooses to spend his pass token here, he can then delay his activation, and then that forces the other acclimator to move. Not knowing exactly where his target's going to be, he'll probably make some move like this, and then the second player can pull up his range band, see exactly where that ship's going to be able to threaten him, and then he can make the appropriate move. If he's got a nav dial, nav token, something like that, he can make a move like this and drop himself in a nice spot where that when the acclimator moves forward again, he can then hit him with a double arc. That's the classic use of the pass token. Something to consider is that, pass tokens discard, so you can't get them back. So second player cannot repeat this process in the next turn if he chooses to use his pass token here. So a lot of the game is going to revolve around knowing when the two fleets are close enough together that it's going to make a difference when that pass token is used to try to defuse a good shot from the first player. Now we're going to move on to the situation where the first player is the one with fewer activations. And I draw your attention to the following text. So, don't really understand why this is necessary. That's my opinion. I think that this is an unnecessary addition. I think just leaving it as it was would be fine. But the rules state that if the first player has fewer ships, then they gain one fewer pass token than they would normally get. And so that has some implications for first player that I think will end up leading to second player being the primary focus for this edition. And I'll show you why. We're going to go back to our same setup. We're going to have the Separatist be the first player now. So there are 3 Separatists facing off against 4 clones. By rule, there is fewer Separatist ships, so they would normally get a pass token, but because they are the first player, they do not get a pass token. So, as they start to activate, the first player has to go first. You'll see the Munificent move, then you'll see a Consular, a Consular that's not near to the engagement, hopefully, will go as a delaying activation. Then the Hard Sail has to go, and then the second player will respond with another Consular. And so what you end up with is a situation to where the first player has to then move a ship with 2 of the enemy's ships yet to activate, which I do not understand why they would want to create this scenario, because basically what the enemy can do, what the second player can do, is they can hold off their 2 most damaging long-range shooters until the first player has to activate and then move into range. And this process is not limited to 1 token round. It will happen every single round until the first player can kill a ship, because this has nothing to do with pass tokens. It has everything to do with the absence of a pass token, so there's no discard involved. If you have 2 very powerful long-range shooting ships and you're the second player and you out-activate the first player, you're going to get to shoot with both of those ships after every enemy ship has gone. And so I think that this is going to become a big theme in Armada going forward. I have asked a couple of the playtesters that I know why this was done. I think this is a massive overreaction to last first, because honestly, if you have even activations and you don't give away a cheap kill early, which is a mistake that you should not be making, and if you do make it, you should be punished for it. This is a overreaction to last first that's going to be a big part of Armada going forward. I think we need to just be aware, if you're first player and you have fewer ships than them, they're going to get to activate with 2 ships after you're done. I think the end result of this, the takeaway from this, is you need to have at least 4 activations. I don't think it's a smart idea to play with 3 activations unless you have a large enough bid to prevent being given first player against your will and forced to fly into a bad situation turn after turn after turn. The next change we're going to talk about today is the change to the Evade token. The Evade token is a lot more useful because it now works at close range, just like it does at medium range, essentially. And it has this additional effect where if the target is smaller than the attacker, you can discard the token and affect an additional dice with it. So that's going to be big for small spaceships, especially, who kind of took a hit because of the de-emphasis on activations, which I think is good. I think a ship should be taken on its own merit, not on the number of activations in your fleet, and that's exactly what it's become. And small base ships especially are going to benefit a lot from this, because used to be Demolisher could roll in, roll 4 black dice, get 2 hits and 2 crits, doing like 6 damage with an APT trigger on it, and that little CR90 probably goes poof. And he still might, but he has the option to spin one of his evades and make those 2 hit crits get re-rolled. And that's something that was previously not there before. Now we have it. It's a re-roll, so it's not a certain thing, but it's nice, especially in the face of a lot of the dice fixing and things that can be done. For example, let's say we take Screed. Demolisher rolls in with Screed, he gets a hit crit, he changes it, another dice to another hit crit. Now you're looking at 2 hit crits. You can discard an evade and make them re-roll all that, which is good. So that's going to be a big piece of the pie going forward. To give a nice real-world example of this evade in action, you see this Home 1 and this Assault Frigate facing off against this my MC-75 and my Admonition. That Assault Frigate isn't in a bad way. But in the scenario normally, a couple weeks ago, that Assault Frigate would have very little recourse against Assault Proton Torpedoes. But now, even though I hit him with the double arc, he can use his evade once on the green side to make me re-roll one of my hit crits to try to stop that APT trigger. And let's say he's successful. Then the front could shoot him, and then he could take that red evade and spin it like he would normally spin it, to get the special double dice affecting result. It doesn't have to be green to start with. You can discard it, and he can force me to reroll 2 dice off of that. That helped extend the life of this Assault Frigate a little bit. It still didn't get out of there because it's in a very, very bad position. You can see Admo's closing in too. But it's an option that previously was not there, and we won't go into this, but I think too far. But I think the changes to the evade token, in conjunction with the changes that have been made to a lot of the black dice brawling cards and components and concepts, it's going to make black dice oriented ships not nearly as strong as they were. That's the shortest I can go into that without spinning off into a long discussion of the card changes. There are significant changes to Squadron Keywords that we want to talk about. The addition of some keywords as well. You have Adept X, that lets you reroll dice either against ships or squadrons. That's something that you'll see on Jedi Starfighters. It's really solid. I mean, Swarm's good. This is just all the time Swarm that happens regardless. AI battery and AI anti-squadron, obviously that's a separatist thing that basically just makes them want to get commands from ships, not just kind of shooting in the squadron phase. Dodge allows you to force dice to be rerolled. That's nice. You'll see that on Jedi Starfighters as well. The big change, the change that everybody is concerned about and or excited about, is the intel change. That intel gives grit to friendly squadrons at distance 1, and that's massive. Because gone are the days when you can fly directly past the enemy fighter screen and bomb them while they're in your grill. You have actually got to send squadrons in and scrape those defending squadrons off the hull zone that you want to shoot at and then bomb. It's going to delay a bomber fleet a little bit. I think it's going to add a lot of benefit to just a pure fighter screen, because before, intel could pretty much just ignore a pure fighter screen. It could move in and just bomb right over the top of them. Now they have to at least acknowledge the existence of the fighter screen and engage them, because grit, unlike old intel, even if you're only engaged with one person, you still cannot shoot a ship while engaged with them. Also, there's Scout, which is basically a clone thing due to the hyperspace rings upgrade, and you got Screen, which is a separatist thing. It's kind of like Escort. You can read it. And so the big takeaway is the intel change. Intel doesn't work as it used to. Now it gives grit, and grit, the big thing that you got to remember with grit is you cannot move if you're engaged with more than one squadron. even if one of those squadrons is heavy. So if you've got an A-wing and a Y-wing, engage with you, you can't move. Even though that Y-wing is the second ship holding you down and he's heavy, that does not work. It is specifically spelled out in here. That is a common misconception. But that's been FAQ'd for a while now. It's just in the official rules reference now. So keep that in mind. I'll probably do a squadron video. Honestly, I am not the greatest with squadrons, and I don't think that I'm in a place right now to speak with authority on how to use them. So I'll probably do a video once I have a little more experience and have seen more skilled players use this. Something that's not really a tactical discussion, but something that you need to be aware of playing Armada going forward, is that there's another change to readying cards. Used to, all your cards that were tapped would refresh at the end of the turn, easy peasy. Now, there are some cards that have costs associated with them, and these two slides will spell out the exact, specifications of that, but the short version is you can't just refresh everything when you want to, and there's going to be a lot of fleets that need token generation to ready their effects. And so I think what that's going to do is you're going to have to start taking a hard look at, okay, well, what tokens am I going to try to ready? What things am I going to build into my list to make sure that I have tokens to allow my abilities to trigger? And some upgrades are just not going to get taken in fleets that would otherwise really like them, just because, well, I don't really have a good way to ready it. I think this can have a couple effects on list building going forward. I think number one, if you have not bought stock in Hondo Ohnaka, do it quickly, because he's going to become very, very useful and very prevalent in a lot of lists. I think Rebels would probably use Hondo and Ahsoka Tano together to basically create tokens of whichever type they want very commonly, because tokens fuel a lot of the more powerful upgrades that we're seeing in 1.0. ECM and Gunnery Team come to mind as one of the biggest things that you want to have refreshed. Also, there's this jerk on the block called Dooku, and he puts out raid tokens, and the one way to kill raid tokens is to spend tokens that match those raid tokens to get them removed. So between Dooku's presence and the increased just mechanics that you have to go through to utilize some of these more powerful upgrade cards, tokens are going to be a much more important factor in your games, and I think that that's also going to reward playing your list a lot. It's going to be difficult to just pick up a list and do all of the token manipulation and sharing and swapping and changing that you're going to need to do on the fly. So I think that, if you're playing a list that has a lot of these interactions, you're going to be very, very sad if you don't dry run this list a couple times before you go play something serious. Because these upgrades that require pay costs are not going to be worth their points if you can't use them, and you may play the list a couple times and just decide, well, I personally can't remember to do it, or I'm not usually in range to do it, or the opportunity is not usually there. And so even though this is probably the best upgrade for the ship, I'm not going to be able to get my money's worth out of it, so I'm not going to take it. And so so now that we've got all the reading out of the way, my impressions of 1.5 are very positive. Most of the changes are very good for the game. I think it's going to be a much better version of Armada. Not that Armada wasn't a great game already. I've played many, many war games, and Armada is the best tabletop war game you can play. Based on fairness, based on the skill required by its players to be good at the game, it is far and away one of the most skill-intensive and rewarding games to be good at. And that's not going to change. And a lot of your tactics that you used to use are not going to change either. The things that got really affected was the last first was very hard. It was hit very hard. And that's not a bad thing, because there was no opportunity window for the opponent, the person who's having it done to them, to be able to react. And that's critical in any game, but very critical in a war game especially, is the timing window of they did something threatening, and then I need to get to react, but I don't, and so they can do two things back to back. That's a feel badsy. I worry. The only negative that I have or see or concern myself with in this new edition is the overreaction against last first and the seemingly arbitrary -1 pass token penalty that's applied to first player just to basically ensure that last first doesn't happen on the closing turn. And that's, to me, if you're playing well, if you know what you're doing, having even activations is all you should ever ask of the game system. You shouldn't ask it for a additional pass token cushion crutch to not get last firsted. If you make a mistake and you give up an activation early, that's on you. Own it and don't do it again. But I worry that we have swung so far into countering last first that now it's not even going to be an archetype. Between that and the changes to assault proton torpedoes and concussions and OE and Avenger and all these other things, going forward, my suspicion is that Armada will become a lot more long-range shooting, which is good. That's fine. I like that. I think it's been a lot more about using your entire fleet as a unit to fight their entire fleet as a unit, not some Rockstar Star Destroyer slashing in and killing something and flying by, which is a welcome change. It's a great thing for the game, and I'm really happy that they're doing that. I just think that it was a little heavy-handed to go ahead and not only give us that even activation fairness that we want, but give the second player like a distinct 2 activation advantage, so he can essentially afford to screw up once and still block the last first. Squadron play is going to be much changed. They're going to need to be much more spread out. I don't think you'll see squadrons flying in a big ball anymore unless there are good reasons for that, like auras, bubbles of protection from, say, Janors or a lot of these Rockstar Jedi Starfighter aces. Short of that, I think your squadrons are going to be spread out because you don't want to allow 1 or 2 small squadrons to zip forward and lock down your whole fighter wing. But that remains to be seen because that's not really my forte. I'm mostly a ship guy. But now I think that we'll see a much more diverse and much more spread out air war all across the fleet instead of just a massive ball of squadrons just slowly moving into the enemy capital ships and bombing them into dust. Thank you for watching. Hope this was helpful. Hope this was informative. I'll do some videos specific to Clone Wars, specific to Separatists, specific to some of the new upgrade cards and how those are going to affect things going forward. I'll leave you with a couple snapshots of some lists that I've been playing around with, just in case you're like drawing a big blank on like, well, what do you think we should play? But guys, have fun with it. This is the time where it's a whole new world. There's not an entrenched meta of all these, specific archetypes. Go try stuff. You could be the guy who comes up with the new thing. And even if you don't, you'll become a much more well-rounded player for playing so many different styles of fleets, because right now there's not store champs coming up. There's not regionals and primes coming up. There's not even worlds from what we can tell right now. There is no pressure to try to hone in a list. This is the Wild West. Play what you want to. Have a great time with it. And please encourage and bring new people into the community. This is the time for us Armada players to welcome newcomers with open arms, to take the time to try to help them, to take the time to give them advice, but also to just get them the reps and the comfort level with the game that they need to stay. There will be no better time in the history of Armada than right now to bring new players into the game. Please, if you think these videos are helpful, send them to my channel. My intent with these videos is to try to help the community by giving relatively objective discussions of how to use your fleets, and hopefully that'll help them. So thank you. Have a good day.